All right, welcome to AIGA Real Talk, where we strip away the polished veneer and dive into the conversations that move our industry forward. Real change begins here. No sugarcoating, just straight talk. Thanks for joining us this afternoon. I'm Victor Davila on the AIGA board. Please introduce yourself in the chat and please let us know where you're tuning from. This series was created because we believe the most powerful conversations happen when we're honest about our challenges and opportunities. Today, we're focusing on leadership, and we brought together some incredible voices to help us unpack this. From the AIGA board, we have Rachel Elnar, Jennifer Ford, Reggie Tidwell, and me, Victor Davila. And to moderate this panel, let's welcome the amazing and legendary Debbie Millman. In this session, we'll explore going from chapter to national leadership. But most importantly, we want to hear from you. Drop questions in the chat. This is your conversation too. We're streaming on LinkedIn, YouTube, and Riverside. So a big thanks to Jordan Hall from AIGA Portland, who is moderating the chat. Before we dive in, remember this is a space for candid dialogue. We're here to challenge assumptions, share real experiences, and work together toward actual solutions. So good to see you, Lauren. I see a few people on the stream. Hello, David, and Debbie, take it away.
Hi, everyone. I've been a member of AIGA since 1998, probably before some of you were born. And my tenure with AIGA has been a bumpy one. I first was invited to join back in 98 by Rick Buffet, what was then called the Brand Experience Group. It was a special interest group that wasn't funded by AIGA. We had to make all of our own finances. We had to raise all of our own money. I remember we had a flea market and we had a bake sale. I made cupcakes and I loved doing it. At that time, I was really looking to be part of something much larger than what I was doing in corporate branding, which was wonderful, but also I was conflicted about a little bit. And so I loved doing this. I loved being part of this little group. And at the end of the 2 years of my term, I wanted to keep being on the board. And everybody had a vote. There was a panel of people that were voting, and I didn't get reinstated. I was, I guess, kicked off the board, and they told me that the reason was because my work was too traditional. And I was devastated, like truly, 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 truly devastated, because I wanted so badly to be part of this organization. A couple of, maybe a year or so later, AIGA New York put out a notice about mentoring. And I thought, well, if my peers won't accept me, maybe young people will. And I decided to apply to be a mentor with the New York chapter. And I did get accepted to that and started what has now been, believe it or not, a lifelong relationship with my mentee. Alexandra Alcantara was my mentee back when she was in the High School of Art and Design. I mentored her for her 3 years that she was there. I helped her get into SVA, helped her get a scholarship. And now, like 20 years later, we're still friends. I went to her wedding. She has a son. I mean, it's incredible. So I did that. And then one day out of the blue, I got an email from Emily Oberman, who was then the president of the New York chapter. And she asked me if I was interested in participating in the New York chapter as a board member. And that was like one of the happiest days of my life. And I remember writing her back and saying that, first of all, Emily Oberman was my hero, still is. And the fact that she was writing to me and inviting me to be part of the New York board was incredible. And so I did that for my 2 years. The second year, I became the secretary and helped raise money. And we did have a good amount of money that I know Stacy may remember. When I left the board in New York, Stacy Panisopoulos, of course, the exec director of New York, when I left the board, I left it in very good financial standing. In the meantime, Sean Adams reached out to me to ask me if I would be interested in being on the national board. And I told him that I absolutely was. But if I didn't get accepted, like if I got rejected again, it would be a mortal blow to me. Like I just could not handle another rejection from this organization that I love so much. But I didn't get rejected. I got accepted. I was on the board, the national board, for 3 years, loved every minute of it. I decided when I was on the board that I would try to visit every single chapter when I was on the board. And luckily for me, after I was on the national board, I became national president. So I actually had 5 years in which to visit the then 66 chapters, which I did, including South Dakota, Alaska, and Hawaii. And it was amazing. It was amazing. And I saw how the soul of this organization are the chapters and the chapter leaders. And so we're here today to talk about what the journey has been for the 4 members of the national board that are here, and to have a conversation about leadership, about really what it means, the accountability that you have to have as a leader. If we have some time, maybe I'll read David Foster Wallace's great, all-time great definition of leadership, which I always share with all my students. But so to get started, I'd really love for our 4 board members here to sort of do just exactly what I did. Talk about the evolution. How did you get involved? What was your journey? What pitfalls or obstacles might have stood in your way? What were your proudest moments? I can share some of those too as we go through. And so, Reggie, I want to start with you. Tell us your journey.
Hey, everybody. Reggie Tidwell. I was I was on the board for the St. Louis chapter more than 20 years ago. So aging myself here.
We're peers.
And, honestly, that was one of the most powerful experiences of my design career, because it's when I really started to meet my people. My network grew immensely, seemingly overnight. We had really amazing events in St. Louis. St. Louis, obviously, being a larger metropolitan city, a lot of designers there. At one point, I was an educator for Washington University. And so bringing in education into the mix, it just really, this was sort of the beginning of my career. So it was a great place to establish myself as a designer. And then fast forward to more than 20 years later, I was in Asheville. I moved to Asheville in 2003. I got here and immediately missed that community of design. The closest chapters were in Knoxville and Charlotte, which meant I had to drive an hour either way to find events, AIGA events. So I declared at that point that I was going to start a chapter in Asheville. It had to happen. And it took a while. We had to really establish a great design community here. I think when I moved here in 2003, I reached out to every designer I knew. And I think at the time there was maybe 7 or 8 of us in town. And now there's 200 or 300 designers here in Asheville. We became a chapter in 2019, obviously right before the pandemic, which was really interesting. We were able to pivot very quickly because our board was absolutely amazing. Our current president, John Hornsby, was on one of the founding board members as well. He was able to help us get our online events up to speed immediately because he had already been doing that for Creative Mornings. And so we were able to pivot and thrive through the pandemic and still be a source for our community, for connection, we were all obviously going through the same thing. There was burnout. There was a lot of fear. People were having stagnant business. So it was a really good time to have had a chapter in place. So I feel really proud of not only just our community, but our founding board members for being able to go through this journey with me.
And what did you learn through that process? What was the biggest takeaway that you might be able to share with anyone here that's either thinking about reinvigorating their chapter or restarting or extending in some way? Like what can you share that might be beneficial for the folks that are here and listening, or for anybody that might listen after?
No, absolutely, Debbie. That's a great question. I mean, for me, I think the biggest takeaway was that designers are resilient. Like I think our industry, the work that we have to do, the clients we have to work with, the types of projects, the very nature of the type of projects that we have to do are usually centered around problem solving. And so I learned just trust our designers to reshift, to pivot, to do whatever they need to do to continue to be viable, to continue to have the presence that they need to thrive in adverse conditions.
Thank you, Reggie.
Absolutely, Debbie.
Yeah, Michelle just said, love this story, Reggie. It looks like people are really enjoying it from the chat.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and thank you for starting your Vibrant chapter. You know, it's people like you that I think help us get to better places just by your energy and your enthusiasm and your passion and dedication. You know, the one interesting thing that I can add is that everybody that's on this call with me today is my friend as well. And I've had a long-term relationship now, you know, platonic, with Reggie, with Rachel, with Victor. Victor and I go way back. And I think Victor and I became friends like right when I started. And so I think there's something really extraordinary about the connections that we all make with each other. You know, I mentioned Emily Oberman at the beginning in my story, and she was my hero from afar. And I was so intimidated by her. And now she's my best. Like, how lucky am I? I'm not teasing. So Rachel, let's hear your journey.
Thanks, Debbie. Yeah, I mean, what you were just saying, you know, building these relationships and becoming best friends, like it's amazing. I've had so many heroes that I thought, okay, wow, this person's great. Stefan Sagmeister, Debbie Millman, there's no way, right? You could get access, but not until I was able to volunteer with the board did I realize you do get that access. So as a student in college, I was a member because I wanted to basically attend a conference for cheaper. So I joined the AIGA conference in New Orleans 20 odd some years ago, which was like was the best experience of my life, just jumping into those conferences and just being surrounded not only by designers, but just a well-designed event. And then after I finished college, well, you know, I was a little critical, as I usually am, critical of the chapter for not celebrating the birth of annual reports. So my beginnings was with Michael Stinson. He was in annual reports. And I suggested, guys, you really should do a panel about annual report design and how it came to fruition. And of course, you know, boards, chapter boards, as they do, they're like, you know what, that's a great idea. Why don't you join the board and facilitate this? That never happened, but I did become a PR chair and worked under Augustine Garza. Augustine is great, such a great president at AIGA Los Angeles. And I was able to test the waters and doing PR stuff. I've never done public relations, but I was able to, you know, write all sorts of information and get the word out about our events and make a difference. So the fact that I was able to do something that I've never done before and do it on a volunteer basis allowed me to work with people, allowed me to test my skills, allowed me to grow my leadership in ways that I couldn't do if I was trying to get a job doing this. After that, I became a VP of communications under Michael Lejeune, and that's when I joined my very first AIGA leadership retreat in Omaha, which was so great. And so that's where I met Debbie as well. And then after that,
That was an epic leadership retreat.
It was so epic. And then after that, I became a secretary under Jason Adams. So getting involved with chapter leadership just allowed me to not only grow my network locally, but allowed me to see the fruits of my efforts, right? Like I could see that if I put out some information or if I help build out the site or put out a blog post or contact people, I could see the registration numbers go up. Like, wow, I could see this back and forth with the community. That was so wonderful.
Is there anything that you can point to as a defining moment, a way in which you maybe stepped out of your comfort zone to sort of experiment with leadership in a new way, or a way in which you tried to overcome some fear in yourself to take this step into being a stronger, better, more vibrant, and more active leader?
Well, I think even just jumping into PR chair with not having any public relations experience, just saying, you know what, I can do that. I literally just read a book about public relations because I was trying to drum up some business for my firm, Ramp Creative. And I thought, let's just try it out. So I was able to help fill the the gala that we had for the fellows. We needed 100 more people in 2 weeks. And with some of the PR efforts that I did, we almost hit that goal. So we're almost sold out. But I saw the fruits of so yeah, I jumped in with 2 feet. It was so scary, but I did it anyhow. Another thing that was super scary is going to those leadership retreats, thinking, I don't know who these people are. There's Debbie over there. I'm going to say hi. No, maybe I won't. But Debbie, when you came back to me, like I think it was AIGA, the Minneapolis conference, and you said, hi, Rachel. I was like, oh my God, she knows my name. The fact that, that because you are a member, because you are a leader, there is this kinship that you never thought existed before, right?
Yeah.
So the fact that you have this access, and by access, I don't mean like, oh, you can get them to do what it's not like that. What it is that you have a shared love in leadership and in design and creativity. You are surrounded by people who have the same love. That just connects you automatically. And then the fact that, I have over 200, 300 couches to sleep on across the nation, that has never happened before. The fact that when you get into chapter leadership and you become part of this larger network is like mind blowing, because you're only really focused on your local network. You only focus on Los Angeles, but you don't realize that you have the same issues as, the New York chapter. You have the same issues as Asheville. You have the same issues as Omaha. And it's a great way of just connecting.
Yeah,
That didn't answer your
absolutely.
question. I'm sorry, Debbie. I
No,
just
it
went off.
did. It absolutely did. It absolutely did. And it reminded me of something I want to share. But before I do that, I just want to ask for everybody here, if you have any questions, please put them in the chat, because we'd really like to make this a conversation among us all and not just the 5 of us. So please, if you have questions, put them into the chat, and we'd really, really love to answer them. But at my first leadership retreat, Michael Beirut was the president of the national board. And I, at that point, was still on that. It was when I was on the brand experience board. And we all went to the leadership retreat. It was my first one. This was the first time I actually saw Emily Oberman in person. And I'll never forget the moment thinking, oh my God, she's the most gorgeous person I've ever seen in my life, and just saw her from afar. There was a dinner that I was invited to because we were this little leadership group within the organization. And somehow, I don't know how, somewhat miraculous, I got seated next to Michael Beirut. It was June. It was during the time that the Knicks were in the playoffs. In the basketball playoffs, the finals. I was very into basketball, still am, but I was much more rabid at that time. And so I kept checking the score. And because Michael was also interested, I was doing like a play-by-play. And Michael wrote me a letter afterward, a handwritten letter, because this was like, I don't know, maybe 2000, 2001, 2002, if that. And he told me how much he enjoyed sitting next to me and experiencing the play-by-play for the Knicks playoffs. And because I had talked to him about a project that I was doing at the time for the radio station, Hot 97 in New York, he asked if he could see more of that work. I still have that letter. A letter hand-signed, hand-typed by Michael Beirut that I got after the leadership retreat, which I never would have ever gotten had I not been part of AIGA at that time. But I also have to say, like Rachel, I was scared out of my mind. My heart was pounding. I was super nervous. And at the time, I was getting play-by-play updates like on the telephone. A friend of mine was calling me to tell me. There wasn't like live streaming or anything like that. So it was quite a production. So thank you for sharing that, Rachel, and thank you for inspiring that memory. For anybody that might not know Michael Beirut, or if you haven't had an opportunity to get to know him, he is truly not only one of the smartest designers I've ever met, but not only the most talented, but he's also the most generous and the nicest. So, Victor, your turn. Tell us about your trajectory.
Thank you, Debbie. And I just saw the question on the chat. I think this is going to answer that question as well. I've been a member since 07 or 09. And I think that's when I first met you, Debbie. I think it was when you were doing your Orlando visit. And then I saw you again at the leadership conference in Denver, and we chatted over shrimp or something like that, at like a little small meal. And I was just taken as
You
to
can always
how
find me around the shrimp, by the way.
It was great. It's a core memory. And I was so taken how friendly everybody is. You know, like they say, don't meet your heroes, but there you were, and you were chatting with me like if I was like your best friend. And I met Michael Beirut sometime around that time too. And everybody's very, very sweet. But I'm a bit of an introvert, and I have a friend from high school, Chrissy Peters, who would always tell me, is like, you should join AIGA, you should become a leader because I think that's what you'd like to do. And I was always reluctant. And I had started this illustration collective in Orlando called Giant Illustrators, and we had put on a show, and then we invited the local chapter to come have like an AIGA Orlando night at the show. And a few weeks later, Sarah Collins, who was the then president, called me up and invited me for the board. And I felt like I was being like drafted to the majors, and I thought it was like the best thing ever. And I was super excited. Tom Hope, who was a past president, once told me that AIGA serving on the board was like a crash course MBA because you have to have so many different kind of roles in it. So I didn't know what to expect. And I knew as I could identify then that in order to grow my career, I had to put myself in front of people. I had to get out of my shell. I had to become more of an extrovert. So when my first volunteering was checking people in at the table. So it would force myself to try to get to know everybody. And I started from co-education chair. I went to membership. I went to VP, to co-president, to president with Devin Hornschmeyer. And from there, I just started kind of like meeting people, and the rest is history. I met all these fine folks here. I think leadership retreats, are the constant in all our stories, because I think that is when we make those really true connections. Jen used to drive down from Gainesville to our Orlando events, so that's how I met Jen. She'd volunteer for us before there was an AIGA Gainesville. And but you get to really know people. You get to kind of like put these things on. You get to invite people, drive them around, get to have real conversations beyond design about each other's lives and make those really great connections. And that's really what how I grew. And as a teacher, I teach at the University of Central Florida. I could recognize that I had to represent for my students. So I couldn't be that person that would preach something and then not practice it. So I knew that I had to get involved in the community. And I found that the design community is full of incredibly empathic and generous people who have your back. Even when you don't fully agree with each other, you have each other's back. And it's been a really, really great experience. And then going back to leadership retreats, it was in my I guess it was the last leadership retreat that we had in Atlanta, where we were like on the last night. And Frances Alana from Dallas, Fort Worth, I think she was the incoming president's council chair. And she's like, you know what? You should do it next. You should go for it because I think you'd be good. And I kind of like laughed it off. And then a year later, when the applications came forward, she's like, remember when I told you should do that? Now's your time. You should. And that's what led me to the national board. I didn't know that I was going to get here, but I've enjoyed every minute of it. I think the every board that I've served on, whether it's the local board or the national boards, are full of incredibly smart people that I've learned a lot from, and it kind of like forces you to up your game in a lot of ways. But that's my experience. Is just kind of like I saw that AIGA Orlando and AIGA as an organization was a way to help me grow as a designer, as a person, as a communicator, as a teacher, and all those things.
Yeah, I'd like to add on to that, because you've been so instrumental in not just helping your own chapter that you're a part of, but also some of the surrounding chapters in Florida. Victor reached out to me, I don't know, maybe 2 years ago. I think it was post-COVID, and asked if I would come visit the Miami chapter to sort of drum up some excitement for the Miami chapter. And I said, and I came down and I invited some of my students that were my alum that were living in the area. Neil Anufrishan was one of my star students, and asked him to come to the talk that I was giving, which he did, and encouraged him to get involved, which is something he wanted to do but was intimidated to do at the time. But he did. He got involved, and now he's the president of
Now he's the
Miami
president.
Chapter. It's so incredible, and I'm just so thrilled to see his leadership and his growth and the opportunities that this is affording him. And so, I think one of the things that I do hear from people, especially the young people, when I go to different chapters or even just different schools, that people are intimidated somehow. They feel scared or shy, or they're introverted. And I think the onus is on the chapter leaders to, if you see somebody that is really wanting to be included and wanting to volunteer, to be as open as you can with those people, because those are going to be the ones that stick around.
Agreed. I think that's the experience I've had in every organization or every chapter or board that I've served on. And we have just an incredibly smart community, and I think they're very helpful. So we just have to give each other the chance to lead. And I think people take, I'm also on the DEC, the Design Educators Community Steering Committee, and that's another group of incredibly smart people, but they want to lead. We want to lead, and we want to help. We want to help make our community and our world better. And this was an avenue for that, for me at least.
Yeah. I mean, my sense when I first started was that it was an organization of my heroes. And I didn't know that I deserved to even be involved, or that I shouldn't feel that I had anything of value to offer. And I really feel that being involved changed my life.
Agreed.
And we'll talk about that. I saw a
100%.
question come in on the chat about what did it do for our careers? And I want to come back and ask everybody that, because I think it's such a great question. Jen, let's talk about your trajectory.
So I went to college in a very rural kind of area, far from the big design capitals. I went to Idaho State University. So I was in the bottom corner of Idaho near Utah and looking for ways to learn more and connect with designers. There weren't a lot of us. And I found the AIGA Salt Lake City chapter and some of the events they were doing. And there were a couple that kind of aligned with my schedule. I made the drive. I'm used to the drive, Victor. That's why I can. I made the drive and just felt so invigorated from what the chapters were doing, and like that there were other people like me doing this work and that I could learn from and really, be excited by what I was doing again, which had kind of, I wasn't sure. I was still young. I wasn't really sure what to do. And then I ended up moving to Florida. I'm in Gainesville, Florida now, and started looking for those same kind of things. And AIGA was what I found. There's an AIGA Jacksonville chapter, Orlando chapter, Tampa, but there wasn't anything near me. I would drive, drive an hour and a half, drive 2 hours to go to these events. The first time I volunteered was with Orlando. It was after the Pulse shootings. They were doing a fantastic event, Love by Design, and I just had to be a part of it and had to feel like I was doing something. There really I wasn't sure what I could do, but I saw designers doing whatever they could to support their community, and I just wanted to be a part of that. I think that's probably the first day I met Victor, and I'm sure he's tired of me ever since. But I just loved that, things that people wouldn't typically think of a designer or a graphic designer being involved in. Now you can see how designers support their community and care about their community and really wanted to be a part of things. And I wanted to bring that here. I know there were designers, it's a college town. We're kind of isolated and all over the place. Where can we come together to really make this a Gainesville experience? And I was able, like Reggie, to start a chapter. I think we were close to the same time. And it was just, I remember the first time I had to get up and introduce a speaker. I was terrified. I had little note cards, and we went big and we brought Aaron Draplin from Portland, and we were going to start big if we were doing anything. And I was like, oh my gosh, it's this big famous designer, and I'm just this little person, and I need all my note cards. And I was terrified, and I stood up there and I did it. And then went back to the sign-in table and just almost passed out. I was very afraid. And then 3 years later, we actually brought Aaron back and we sold out this room. We had to add extra events. There were so many people coming for it. And at the very, we're about to start, and I go, oh no, I need to introduce Aaron. And I just walked up there and did it. And I was like, that for me was how much growth I had in 3 years. Through AIGA, I had become very used to, okay, I need to get up there and do that. I know what I'm talking about. I didn't need to have the note card in front of me. I could talk about AIGA. I could talk about my community. I could talk about design and not be, no, I'm going to sound stupid or I'm going to be intimidating. It was for me, that was a moment where I was like, okay, I've grown a lot in these 3 years, and how can I do more? And at that point, I reached out to Francis Ilyana, again, Francis in Dallas, thank you, and wanted to get involved with Design for Democracy, which was a national initiative. It still is. And that for me felt like, okay, where can I do something and be active and make a difference? And so I served on the Design for Democracy committee for 3 or 4 years, putting together the Get Out the Vote posters, campaigns, and all of that. And then, Victor was tapping me like, you should do more. You should do more. And I also became the president's council chair. And then now here I am on the national board. I've grown immensely in that amount of time, but my career trajectory has grown with that. And I can't, the community, the 300 couches and everywhere to sleep on, that honestly has been the most important part of all of this for me is the community. And I have some of my best friends live in cities all over this country and have been a part of their local chapters, the national organization, all of it. And I talk to them daily, and that has been really the vital piece for me, and why I've stayed involved is like, I'm getting a lot out of this involvement as much as I feel like I'm, giving back to the organization. So it's really been a great experience for me.
Yeah, I would say that AIGA, in the 27 years now I've been part of the organization, has the experience helped create my career. I mean, I don't know that I would have the career that I have if it weren't for AIGA. The people that I've met, despite the dubious beginnings, which were really, really hard for me, it's been one of the great journeys of my life to be part of this organization. And, part of the reason we're doing this today is to communicate that, how important it's been, so people know. Thank you, Jen, for sharing what it's done for your career. I've been aggregating the questions, and I do think this question about what it's done for our career is a really important one, so people don't feel that dedicating time to AIGA is sort of self-serving in any way. It's certainly helpful for one's soul, but it is also helpful for one's career in lots of different ways. And so I'd love to hear from Reggie and Victor and Rachel as well. And again, I'd like to spend the next half of our time together answering the questions. We have some really good questions. Leonardo, Michelle, Gila. I'd love to get these questions in front of you all. So let's talk about career for a bit. Victor, you want to talk a little bit about how it's helped shape your career?
Sure. So, like I mentioned, I teach at the University of Central Florida, so I'm surrounded by students every day, as you know. I think all of y'all are teaching or have taught at some point, so you know the energy that the students come, and trying to make sure that we keep up with the ever-changing field is really important, so we don't become stagnant in what we're teaching. So I think being involved in everything that we're involved in, whether it's connections, whether it's bringing people in as speakers, whether just someone to ask questions, just kind of like getting that front row seat as to when the industry is doing, has been really vital for me to bring into the classroom. So the whole getting out of my shell has been very helpful for me because, again, I have to represent to my students. The students see me as someone who is like, like right there, right in the front. So being able to kind of like represent that way, represent my students, has been vital. And I think the being involved with these chapters and with the boards have been incredibly helpful to help me do that.
Thank you. Jen, you already told us. So what about you, Reggie?
I think that's all I have to say right there.
Okay, touche.
Couldn't have said it better myself. No, honestly, I think for me, it's that leadership. Like it's I've been in so many. I've been on boards. I've run a business for 24 years. Now I'm the founding partner in a design agency, and it's given me that confidence to know that when people are relying on me to do something and to give guidance, that I can do it, because I've been in leadership with AIGA for so long. I've helped and been helped by the organization in so many vast ways that over time, it really just starts to build this confidence that this industry that you're passionate about, this is the right path that you're on. It's constantly reassuring, right? And I think for me, being able to also being a mentor, it's being able to see it come full circle, to know that not only have I been given this opportunity to lead and share whatever knowledge that I've gained over the years, it's also reminded me that I'm still forever in that learning seat. There's never a time that I feel like I've learned it all. So I'm constantly a student of design. And you have to be obviously in this industry, but I'm also a student in my community. I'm always wanting to connect and learn from so many of the people that are in my community. So I guess if I really had to distill it down to one single component that has really been a through line through my whole AIGA career, it's connection.
Yeah.
I think leadership comes from that.
This was reminding me, back in 2003, I was en route to the then national conference in Vancouver. And I don't know why, but I ended up in a middle seat on the plane, which was a long ride to Vancouver. And I was talking to the person sitting next to me, who I knew was also going, because at one point, when everybody was filing into the plane, she went, "Hey, Paula." And, so that was Paula Scher, which was like, oh my God, we're on the same plane. And I ended up talking to her, and I was at the time writing for Armin Witt's website, Speak Up, which was the first ever design blog. And I told her that we were having a little reception after one of the, evening events. And I invited her, and she gave me her business card to tell her, what the info about where the event was going to be. And I just put it in my bag, didn't look at it. And then when I got to my hotel room, I saw that it was Joyce Kay, the editor-in-chief of Print Magazine, which was also like a dream of mine to someday write for print. And she came to the event, and 6 or 8 months later, she asked me to do something with the magazine. And then she asked me to write for the magazine, and I'm still writing for the online magazine, and I'm one of the co-owners. So it's like, that helped my career. If I hadn't met Joyce Kay in my middle seat en route to Vancouver in 2003, it's crazy. So Rachel, how has it impacted your career?
Yeah, I see this question came in
tell
from
people what
Michelle.
you are, because you're like a bigwig. You're like a bigwig. Tell people what your career is.
All right. So just quickly, thank you, Michelle, for asking that question. How has being on the board impacted your career growth as well? Well, right now I am a senior creative producer at Adobe. So I help to host shows and live streams for Adobe. Yeah. So yes, might be a big wig from the outside, but honestly, we're just selling software. So anyhow, how has it impacted my career? Well, there's something that I really love to do is lift people up, to showcase people. So I agree on the leadership. I agree on the connections, and it's great to meet and have access to people that you know, love, and admire for sure. But there are also a lot of young emerging voices. And that's something that I feel like having, being part of AIGA allows me to do, is really to reach out, find those talented people, give them a platform, whether it's through Adobe or through TypeEd or for whatever type of platforms that I can give people. That's something that's benefited me, is help to grow my network and help to just share the love with other people. I know it sounds a little strange, like you want to climb the ladder, you want to grow, whatnot, but to lift other people up, to give people, to help bring them to TypeCon or whatnot is something that really benefits me.
This is from Gila. Question to all. Looking back and looking ahead, what do you think should be the chapter's focus to boost even more the AIGA community experience? That's a tough one.
Can I start that one?
I'm actually going to say that not everybody has to answer this question. Let's just get who has an answer, because I do want to make sure we get to some of the other questions, and we have about 17 minutes left.
I think I have an answer for this one, Debbie, if I may. I think what I've learned from my time at AIGA is that each community, each chapter has a very different community, which might have totally different needs. One might be, we obviously have some that are bigger than others, but one might have a lot of students, early young designers, while others might have more seasoned veteran designers. So I think it's tough to figure out one way to really support the community. But one thing that we do here in Orlando that they're still doing, which we learned from mentorship, our mentor chapter was Raleigh, was to have these community meetings where we get the input from the community directly. So they are the ones that would tell us what they were hoping for. And right now, the current leadership at AIGA Orlando is doing a series of workshops, for instance, because that was a direct result of polling or surveying the community. So I think I don't know if there's one answer that would fit every community, but I think it's getting the community involved in what that programming is to serve that audience.
Great. Thank you, Victor. Anybody else want to add something on top of that?
Yeah,
Reggie.
Yeah,
Where is yours?
Yes, I was going to say, I like what you said, Debbie, about this being a sort of the club of your heroes. And for me, it's been that. You, of course, have been one of my heroes for many years. Michael Beirut, I met 20 years ago at a leadership retreat. And for me, we brought Ann Willoughby to Asheville.
Yes.
Which was she's a powerhouse. It was so amazing. It all came together kind of last minute. And it was probably our biggest event of my tenure as president of the chapter. And what I noticed was that not only did it bring everybody out of the woodworks, it gave people access to someone who, she talked about being mentored by Milton Glaser. And that was such a phenomenal story. And she was very accessible. And I think for me, in terms of cultivating that community, bringing people, we talk about access, we talk about heroes, bringing those people into the community to talk to young designers and inspire them, to talk to even senior designers, or in those spaces being inspired by people that have been their hero for many years. I think that's a big component to what AIGA brings to the table. It brings,
absolutely.
When I met Michael 20 years ago, he was like a colleague. I was a young designer, and he was talking to me like, like he'd known me for years, and I loved it.
Reggie, are you saying mentorship?
Huh?
Are you saying mentorship, like going back and forth, like not only, access and connection, but also giving leaders in the community the ability to give back?
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely.
That's a great value.
Absolutely. Yep.
One thing that I can say about the design community in general and the AIGA community very specifically is how willing people are to say yes to things. When I started my podcast 20 years ago, I went first to my friends, and then the rung out was to my design heroes. And so even then, and I, who knew even what an online radio podcast thingy was? But Milton said yes. Stefan said yes. Paula said yes. That's one of the great stories about the early podcast. Paula was doing, it was done by handheld phone sets at the time, believe it or not. And Paula was up in the country on a little vacation, and there was no air conditioning, I guess, in the cabin she was in. And she ended up doing the podcast naked while we were talking, and told me that, like, on air. And I just remember at the very beginning being so overwhelmed by how many people just said yes to doing this thing. I was a nobody, and it was just so generous. And over the years, the people I've invited to New York events or national events, when I was president, just asking for favors from anyone, asking people for money, so many people were willing and are willing to help. So I just think that one thing I'd like to encourage people to do that are listening is don't be shy to ask for things. Very few people will just offer. But when you ask, you're either going to get a yes, a no, or a maybe. No, okay, it might be no right now. It might not be no in the future. You can always ask if you can reach out again. Yes is great, let's do it. And maybe is always an opportunity for a door, keeping that door open. So you'd be surprised at how many people will say yes if you ask. All right, there's a question from Leonardo that I'd really love to get to. Let me bring them up. Question. Given these real talks are so far and few between our day-to-day creative work, I wonder how leaders from AIGA are thinking about creating more real-time useful dialogue and coaching environments to better support its members. Good question, Leonardo. And I know Leonardo also. Hi, Leonardo. Who wants to answer that one?
Yeah, something you could do is something like this, use the chapter channels as the platform to get some conversations going, hold town halls, make sure that you always have a networking element prior to events and afterwards in order to, increase those conversations. I mean, those are some ways that I can think off the top of my head.
Yeah. And I think the intention, correct me if I'm wrong, my 4 national board members here, but I think you're planning to do more of these, right? Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. We're planning on doing more of these, many more of these.
Yeah. So I'm watch this space, because I do think, when we started talking about doing this and planning this particular real talk, I think there was a conversation about, potentially doing more to try to keep those communication lines open. And one thing I want to add to the asking advice, don't feel like you have to ask verbally. Email is really good. It takes away some of the fear as well. And if you put something in the headline like AIGA invite, people are much more likely to open it. And I found a great deal of success doing that.
Kind of like thread on that ask is like, if you just frame it that, hey, I'm with AIJ, again, that generosity comes out. People know it's a volunteer organization. People know that you're trying to do something to help others. So I think that's a great way to get the yes.
Great. Any other answers to Leonardo's question? Given these real talks are so far and few between our day-to-day creative work, I wonder how leaders from AIG are thinking about creating more real-time useful dialogue and coaching environments to better support its members. I mean, I do think on a local level that's really, really important, because people can get together and brainstorm. So for all the local leaders that are here, I'm looking at you, Alberto. Think about how you can really encourage more open dialogue from on a chapter level, and maybe even multi-chapter level. Especially in places where there are more than one chapters in a state, like Florida, like Texas, like New York, like California. I think that's really, really important to cross-pollinate as much as possible. Okay, there is a question from Anna, and this was really directed to Rachel, but I do think it's a good question for whoever wants to answer. She asked about the PR book, which I know you said in the chat you were going to look for and try to find. But the rest of the question is a really interesting one. Keen to get reading list growing. Also, question for all: what literature would or podcast recs for boosting those vital, active leadership skills? And I can say Adam Grant is just an incredible. He has 2 really great podcasts. One is called Work Life, and it's fantastic, and it's really all about leadership and growth and trying to bring a real rigor to determining how you want your career path to go. That's one that I would recommend. I'd also recommend the Tim Ferriss show, because he talks about work-life integration quite a lot. He's super candid about his journeys, his struggles, his successes. I think that's another really, really good one. And I'd love to open it up to the rest of my friends here to recommend. And also, if people have recommendations, put it in the chat, because we'll capture these and be able to create a list for people to go to. So for anybody that has recommendations for advancing leadership, advancing design skills, and so forth, please put that in the chat. Lauren has already acknowledged my recommendation for Work Life. She likes it too. So there you have that. Other recommendations from Reggie, Victor, and Rachel, and hopefully Jen will come back on.
I'm sorry, Debbie. The question was ways that we can enhance our.
I'll read it again.
Thank you.
What literature or podcasts would you recommend for boosting those vital, active leadership skills?
I can't think of anything off the top of my head. I'm sure it will come back to me shortly.
So Jordan is saying, Do the Work, a guide to understanding power and creating change. Seth Godin just wrote an amazing book called Strategy. I can show you the cover here. I'm actually going to show you a couple of books that I think are really, really, really great. Oh, wow, this is a great one too. This is a classic. So let me show you a couple that I have like right here and on hand. Didn't anticipate this question, but this is Strategy, Make Better Plans. And that's Seth Godin. I'm going to show you two books by Kevin Bethune. This one, Redesigning Design, Unlocking Strategic Innovation, just absolute genius. And then his brand new book is called Nonlinear, Navigating Design with Curiosity and Conviction. And not to plug my own thing, but I'm interviewing Kevin with Stephen Heller on Thursday on printmag.com. And so you can have access to talk to him directly if anybody's interested. And then, of course, Decolonizing Design by Dory Tunstall. This is a must read for everyone. And then the classic, it's just been reissued, Thinking with Type by the great, legendary Ellen Lupton, who is just an incredible human being. And then there is one other one that I want to mention.
Also, Lauren said she just picked up the book Creative Endurance.
Oh,
Excellent.
great. And this is Assembling Tomorrow. And this is by two Stanford University D School professors, A Guide to Designing a Thriving Future from the Stanford D School. So just a couple of recommendations from me.
Shameless plug. I mean, my favorite one that I listen to all the time is Design Matters. I just went on a six-hour road trip from Pensacola, and I was able to listen to two episodes. One with with Griffith, which is awesome, and I re-listened to that one a lot.
Another person I would not have met if not for AIGA. I met him at the New Orleans conference, where we were both sitting at a bar, nursing a drink by ourselves, feeling very down about our lives, and spoke for like 3 hours and really helped sort of lift the fog for both of us. And now we've become very dear friends. But,
agreed. Yeah. He's wonderful. And it's the kind of person you meet and it seems like you've known him for years. And get him talking about music because his knowledge of music is incredible. Yeah. But one of the things, just to kind of like go to the question about those vital skills, leadership skills, I would highly encourage anyone, if you get the opportunity to teach, because one of the things I've always kind of like thought was the biggest challenge is when a student asks you how you do something that you've done for 20 years and you've done it in autopilot. So you have to rethink everything you do. And I think it kind of like forces you to reconsider how you do certain things. So whether it's adjuncting or volunteering to give a talk at a high school or middle school or something like that, or just putting yourself out there to speak and to share your story, I highly encourage everyone to do that, because not only will it activate some of your leadership skills, but also put you out there to get in front of people and speak in front of people and share your knowledge, share your story. And sometimes the best lessons are the ones where you just kind of jump into it.
Wonderful.
Yeah, I agree.
Also, Jen said that she's having storms and kind of messed things up, so she got cut off.
I would piggyback on what Victor is saying, is that's how we inspire each other. You know, you never know what kind of gift you have that's going to inspire somebody else in your community. So being able to share who you are, your experience, speaking opportunities, like you said, whether you're an adjunct professor or whether you're just, you know, showing up and, you know, doing a short speaking session about a particular topic. Those opportunities arise. And when they do, and you capitalize on them, it gives you an opportunity to not only learn a little bit more about yourself, but to inspire other people.
Yeah. Well, we have 2 minutes left. We have gotten to all the questions, which is wonderful. Any last words from, I know Jen is unable to join us at the moment. Hopefully, I think she could probably hear us. Anything from Reggie, Victor, Rachel that you'd like to add in our last moments together?
Yeah, I mean, one, I'd like to thank you, Debbie, because you are such an inspiration, and to be able to be in this space with you is so awesome. So thanks for that. But honestly, being able to get out to your local chapters and continue to build our community. I think, honestly, I feel like COVID was a big, sort of a shakeup for all of us. And I think our organization is still sort of making its way back to its former glory. So if you could go out and go to those events and get out to your local chapters and see people and reconnect, I think this is the best possible time to do that, because we've got so many new things. We've got AI to discuss. We've got, there's so many things on the landscape right now that we need to like start having conversations about. And I think one of the best ways to do that is through your local chapters and volunteering and getting to know the people in your design community, because that's going to not only help bolster your career, but it's also going to help strengthen your community overall.
Rachel, Victor, any last words?
No, I just want to say thank you. Just reiterate. Thank you, Debbie, for giving us this time.
Sure. Thank you. Victor?
Thank you, Debbie. The same thing. And if you're a chapter leader joining us, listening to this, I want to thank you for serving. And if you are thinking about becoming a chapter leader, I would encourage you to do so, because it's life-changing, and it's not always kind of like smooth. And there's a lot of kind of like, battles, but sometimes those battles are worth it. And if somebody has to battle it, it might as well be you, because you'll learn a lot about yourself.
Yeah,
But thank you, Debbie.
My pleasure. I wouldn't know any of you if it weren't for AIGA, and I adore you. And I see so many wonderful people online: Alberto, David, Leonardo. I mean, we're like a family. So thank you all. I hope you enjoyed this Real Talk. Hopefully AIGA will continue to do these. And I say at the end of Design Matters, we can talk about making a difference, we can make a difference, or we can do both. Let's do both.
That's
Okay.
awesome.
Thank
Thank
you
you so much, Debbie.
Bye.
So just a couple final things. Thanks so much to Jen Ford, Reggie, Rachel, for the amazing insights. And of course, the incredible Debbie Millman. I just love talking to you all the time. You're an inspiration. So thank you for leading this conversation. And thank you all who participated with your questions and feedback. We'll be doing this again in a few weeks on April 18th. And we're looking for topic suggestions. So make sure to check our LinkedIn for more details. So please join us then. And again, we want to make sure that we hear from you. So please let us know what you want us to talk about. And thank you all for joining us. AIGA is a nonprofit membership organization dedicated to supporting designers and creative communities. By becoming a member, you're investing in your career, the design profession, and a nationwide network of creatives. So join us today at my.aiga.org. So with that, thank you so much, and enjoy the rest of your day. Happy St. Patrick's Day.
Thank you all.
Happy St. Patrick's Day. Bye. Bye, guys.